this is obviously not the popular conference. I looked on the sheet there, and there's 3 doctors and I was up against, so I guess I can work on a PhD. What we're going to talk about today, and I think we have an hour to go over this stuff, is farm transition. And unfortunately, for the most part, this is the topic of the day, right? So, I mean, at some point, when you're talking about farm transition, especially estate planning, you may at some point be having a discussion about what happens when one generation passes on and the next generation is coming aboard. Hopefully, what this will do is sort of look at how do you do that while everyone is still living, and how does that transition happen? How is that different than the estate planning sort of you may think of when we do this? So, given that it's a small group, we'll just kind of go through this. Please stop me if you have any questions. I like to put this up here, just one, because it's good, I think, in the sense of what we're going to do today, and 2, because when you do have a family meeting and you're starting to talk about farm transitioning, having a set of ground rules for that meeting, I think, helps out a lot when you're doing the farm transition discussion. So keep an open mind, ask questions, try to find at least one thing to take away. There's a lot of information, so try to find at least one thing to take away. And you know, we always say, especially even for a farm meeting, turn the distraction devices off when you're in a farm meeting. The other thing is when we do farm transition planning and I'm out working with the family, a lot of times we will actually leave the farm to have the meeting, because just like everybody sits at their own table, and welcome to the conversation here. When you sit around the dinner table, does everybody sit at the same seat every single time at the dinner table? Yeah. Guess what? Dad sits in dad's role, mom sits in mom's role, son, daughter, other children. So one of the things we try to do when we set these ground rules as we get off is we're trying to break some of those family roles and get people into the concept of the business roles and talk about that business aspect of it. The other thing is, and a little bit of a funny story, the one farm that we were on, my partner that I was out with had his cell phone sitting on the table, was on vibrate, and it kept vibrating. And the farm that we were working with, the gentleman kept looking out the window, kept looking out the window. We had no idea what was going on. And when it came down to us, he didn't realize this was vibrating, so it sounded like a calf outside the window, and he was all concerned about it. And what we see sometimes when we have these meetings on the farm is that you're so concerned about the milk truck coming, or the vet that's showing up, or something may be going on the farm, and you're not engaged in the meeting that's happening there on the farm. So it's sometimes a good idea, not always realistic to go off the farm, but if you can, it helps the conversation go along. So how many people, when they say farm succession and transition, automatically think of having a will or some kind of estate plan? Right? If I have a will, I did my succession planning, I put it on the shelf like the gentleman before me said, and let it start gathering dust. Well, the estate planning actually goes a little bit beyond the will. We'll talk about that somewhat today, especially if we have enough time here. Anticipating and arranging for the distribution and disposal of your assets. That's your will. Who gets what? How do they get it? Who's the executor of that estate that's going to make sure that everything goes to everybody? It also includes the transfer of your business. When I say providing for the disability or providing for disabled family members, let's say your spouse is disabled, and now all of a sudden you become disabled or you pass away, and your will may have directives that are set up for how the care is supposed to happen for another family member that may not be able to care for themselves. The will can have that direction to it. And also instructions for your care while you're still living. The estate planning process can at times start before your death, because if you become incapacitated and are no longer able to make decisions, there are directives that you can have that can take care of that part of the process and begin that sort of estate planning process. So succession and transition planning. Succession is more of a series of events. The estate planning, we're going to sit down, we're going to look at the assets, and we're going to come back and revisit that over time. But this is more going through the steps of the succession planning process. How do we transfer that business entity? How do we transfer assets while we're still alive? How do we transfer management of the farm while we're still living? Succession planning should happen. Estate planning absolutely will at some point happen. Is anybody in here planning on living forever? Right? Gentleman back. So you do not have to worry about estate planning. The rest of us are probably going to have to figure it out at some point.
I say word.
So when we think think about succession planning, what are some of the things that make us think that, oh, it may be time to start looking at succession planning? Someday this will all be yours. You know, I mean, that's one of the ones we always hear. You know, the mother and father sit down with their children and say, someday this will all be yours and we're going to divide it up somehow. Congratulations, you've been accepted, right? So son or daughter going off to college. Now that may be 50% of your labor force just decided to go off for 4 years to college and get a degree. That's a succession planning event because now you have to determine how do we keep the business operating. Congratulations, it's a boy. Someone in the family getting pregnant. Again, that is now you have the next generation coming on board. So this starts that succession planning process, and you don't have to hide back there. I don't believe it. So. I regret to inform you, we kind of touched on this a little bit, and I think I'm ready to try my hand at this. Maybe this is the child that you didn't think would ever want to come back to farming. We see this happen a good bit. You think this one's going to keep farming, this one wants nothing to do with farming, and at the end of the day you realize maybe sometimes it will switch. And since this was the grazing conference, that usually says dairy, I changed it to beef for this one, so I figured I would cover 90% of folks who are here. I'm not sure the beef is going for me. And we get that where the situation occurs that the child wants to come back and continue farming, but maybe they don't want to be in the business of farming that the farm is currently in. So what is that succession look like? Because now you may have additional costs, you may be retrofitting buildings, you may be ceasing operations of a dairy or something like that. That all goes into that succession planning process. How do we transition not only to the next generation, but transition between businesses? So do all of these lead to a discussion of succession or transition? I would argue that they do. Which one might come first for your family? I mean, which of these things is happening or has happened? Any others? Anything else that's happened that has made you think, aha, this is the moment we need to actually sit down and start thinking about this? Don't all happen. All right, we'll keep going. This is a good piece that came out of Kansas State University. I like to use this in presentations when I'm talking about succession planning. It's like the AA 12-step process, but it's the 12-step process for succession planning. And it builds upon itself. So what matters most? Identify the wants, hopes, dreams, needs, fears for the farm. Establish your vision and mission statements. Human resource evaluation. Whether you realize it or not, you are all HR managers. You have employees, even if you're only employees of yourself and your spouse or your children. These are still employees of the farm. Where do we stand financially? If you're going to transition the business, you need to understand what the business actually has as assets, what cash, what's available. Is the business doing well? Is it in a growth mode? Is it in a decline mode? And understanding that is key to doing the transition process. Do we have what we need? You know, I mean, if we're going to transition the farm, you know, is the equipment up to date? Do we have the appropriate structures on the farm to do the type of business that we're looking to do? SWOT analysis, we'll touch on that briefly, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, a way of looking at your business. Evaluating financial feasibility, so these are like the financial sections here. Developing your business plan, so for those of you that were in the previous session, you got a quick and dirty on how to do a business plan. We'll touch on this briefly here. And see how at the very top of that list, we're finally getting to estate planning. All of this is happening in the succession planning process. Estate planning is a piece of it, but it's not the be-all, end-all of it. And then actually putting the plan to action. You know, you took the time to write the plan, now we need to look at it and start using it. So step one of this process, what matters most? What does your family value? Is it keeping the farm always a farm? Is the dairy the most important thing at the farm? Religious beliefs, providing financially for all of your members on the farm. What matters most to you on the farm and preserving that? And when I say that, I'm sure that all of you, your children, everything else, all share the same values, right? Everybody in your family is on the same page with exactly what you're looking to do. Yeah, exactly. Head shaking, two different ways, but even in my family, my wife and I always agree, absolutely. So,
She's always right.
happy wife, happy life. So, this is important in that each of you needs to go through this process individually, thinking about these things, and then coming together. So what we'll do sometimes when we're sitting down at the farm to do a farm succession plan or transition plan, we'll get each of the members, children, family members, spouses, to commit some of this to paper, or at least talk about it individually, and then we'll come together as a group to go over this. And what is amazing sometimes is sometimes people think that they're miles apart, but in reality, there may be only one or two tripping points that they're really not in agreement on, and that's part of our process to sit down with them and help them go through that and realize where's the commonalities and where are the things that maybe we need to spend more time on as a family unit going over and discussing as part of the succession process. So hopes, wants, needs, and fears. This is, what do I want to happen to the farm when it transitions to new management? What do I need to happen? Some family members will say, I want all of my children to get an equal share of the farm. Some will say that the child that stayed on the farm should get the majority share of the assets in the transition because they put time, sweat equity, blood into the farm itself. And when we get into the financial part of this, if we were to split the farm up equally amongst all the children, how financially feasible is it that the farm could sustain the debt load of giving cash to those other siblings equal to the value of the farm that the one sibling is receiving? So you need to understand, how do you want to value those things? And one of the things that at times we'll do in a farm transition plan when we're meeting is we'll have people write down the children that are on the farm, the amount of time, the things that they've done, have they bought cattle into the farm, have they replaced things, farm machine equipment, because the value of the farm, think about it, you didn't have that sibling or that child that stayed on the farm. Would the farm be worth what it is today if they weren't there putting effort and time into the farm? And so we can actually start to pencil out what the difference in the value of the farm would be had that child not stayed on the farm. And sometimes when that discussion gets very tight about equal, we're going to build up the already built equity of that child that stayed on the farm and show that there is a dollar value to that. What do I hope happens and what do I fear might happen? We were working with a farm, a dairy farm, and I had conversations with the two sons, and I had conversations with the father. The father told me flat out he was fearing the transition because his sons didn't want to keep dairy. The children told me they absolutely didn't want to keep dairy. But these folks spent how many hours a day together in a barn milking 3 times a day, and they didn't know that each other was wrong about the assumption that they were making, about the fear that they had. So we got past that. Boy, that farm transition plan sailed through about as quick as it could because we got through that fear part. We answered that question. But these are things, this is setting the vision and values, which is what we're going to get to next. What's the vision of the farm? What's the mission of the farm? So a vision statement. I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is actually starting to build the plan together. But when you set the vision for the farm, it should be future oriented. What's the vision of this business, for the next 50 years, 100 years? Where's the farm going? What type of business you're in? So this is kind of as an example. This is a vision statement from Ag Choice Farm Credit. We're the first choice for financial services that help customers succeed. Right? Very broad topic. They want to be the best in their industry, and they want the folks that they're working with to succeed. It doesn't get into a lot of details on what they are, except for the fact that they provide financial services. Whenever dairy farms have a need, they should think first, they evolve, we aim to always be there, always be available, always work on their behalf. So it's a very broad statement, kind of says what they do. They work with dairy farmers, and they want to be there for them at all times. So vision statement, this is what you would sit down in a lot of vision statements when we work on farms, bring in the religious aspects of the family vision. They want to make sure that this farm operates based on those principles, and you can build that right into the vision statement. Mission statement is going to be more today, what the farm looks like, what the business looks like, focused more on the type of business that you're doing. It's more detailed, obviously. It's succinct. Succulent. Boy, that was a spell check there. Good Lord. So spelled right is just the wrong word. That should be succinct. But since we're working in farming, being tasty isn't that either. So what are you selling and what are you in business with? So this case, Land O'Lakes. We are a market and customer-driven cooperative committed to optimizing the value of our members, dairy, crop, and livestock production. More detail for what they're doing. These are the types of things that you pass on in this succession process. You setting this, and this could be the mission and vision of the parents, that they're trying to influence the children, or it could be the mission and vision of the whole family together, that we're all on the same page with this. So you can kind of use this to your benefit to say, when we sit down and think about the farm, whatever objectives, whatever goals, and we're going to go into actually setting those objectives and goals, whatever they are driven by this overarching thought process of what our mission and vision is. So farm service agents, our mission is to deliver timely, effective programs and services to America's farmers and ranchers to support them in sustaining our nation's vibrant agricultural economy, as well as provide first-rate support for domestic and international food aid efforts. So, Farm Service Agency, USDA has a ginormous mission. Farm Service Agency is a very large mission. So they want to do things timely. If you're a beef operation, you may want to deliver quality grass-fed beef. You may want to deliver the most cost-effective. Your mission may be to develop a business that is the most cost-effective at converting your beef from the feed the conversion that you're doing on the farm. You want to be the best at that. You want to put out the best quality product. Your mission statement is going to be touching on those different aspects of it. So goals and objectives, that's the last two parts of this. As you're coming from what are my hopes, wants, needs, and fears, driving into what are the mission and vision. Now we're going to start setting some goals. They should be attainable and easy to visualize and establish where you want to go. So a goal could be that we want to increase herd size, correct? That's a goal. We want to increase the herd size. Objectives, and we use this term SMART objectives. They're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time. So let's say we want to increase the herd size, but in order to do that, and since we're at a grazing conference, perhaps there's some fencing that we need to put up to open up more areas to graze. Okay? So the goal is to increase our herd size. One of the objectives in order to meet that goal is that we need to put fencing up on, this 100-acre section of the farm, 50-acre section of the farm. So this is now getting down to, we step down to, we want to be, the best farm that's out there. How are we going to get to that? Well, we want to grow. We're going to do that through our goals and objectives. Another way to think of this is that goals tell you where you want to go. Objectives tell you how to get there. And when I say this, attainable, realistic, and timely, your goal is to increase your herd size. You don't want to say, we're going to buy 1,000 head with cash on hand by the end of the month. That's not, it's timely. You put a time to it, right? You said by the end of the month, but is it realistic? Is it attainable? Goals can increase your effectiveness. Objectives back your goals and make them more efficient. Goals are typically described in words. Objectives often come with numbers and specific dates. This goes back to the SMART objectives, timely, realistic, attainable. How many were in the previous session with the business plan? Yes. Okay. Couple. This goals and objectives is what's driving the numbers and everything else that's going into the business plan. This is your business plan is going to be set up in such a way to start attaining, to start getting into these objectives and making these decisions. So this feeds into this whole business plan process. And that's why it's step 3. You need to establish this. You need to establish where you're going, and at least an idea of how you're going to get there. Does it mean that you have to do everything on this list that we come up with? Absolutely not. You can put down the things that you want to get to. This is sort of the guidepost that you're going by. You don't have to do everything you put down here, but if you don't, and this is what the gentleman said in the previous session, if you don't commit this to paper somewhere along the line, it's vacant. It doesn't exist. You can always, you can always cheat the man in the mirror, or you can never cheat the man in the mirror. You know what you said. If nobody else knows what you said, then there's no accountability to what you're doing. If you put it down, there's accountability within your family, within your business partners. You need this on paper as best as you can. Human resources and who's in charge. This, I think, is an often overlooked piece of this process, and sometimes I think it's this way because most business owners are dealing with employees, right? They're people that they interview and hire. Some of them, most of them, they've probably never met before. Some of them they may have. When you're dealing with a family farm, your employees are blood. Your employees are your family because they're your children. It's much easier to treat someone who you don't know as well in this employer role, manager role versus laborer role. It's very much more difficult, and you have to break bread with that person at the end of the day because expert in, knows everything that's going on the farm. When you're thinking about how am I going to pass on the farm, you need to identify those folks that have the correct skills and strengths that you know to keep the business going. If your goal, if your vision and mission is to continue to be a farm, right, then you need to have folks that are going to be succeeding you that can continue the farming operation successfully. If your vision and mission is simply to provide for your family members, then the farm has a large value, and selling the farm and divvying up those proceeds could provide financially for your family members. But it's not going to meet your need if your vision and mission is to keep the farm a farm. So this part of this of identifying strengths and weaknesses of family farm members is a very good thing, and it needs to be a realistic conversation. Even if it's something that just you and your wife are talking about, or as business partner you're talking about, you need to sit down and go through this. The other thing is that how do we evaluate folks' strengths and weaknesses if, as employers, we're not providing them clear expectations? You know, how many times have we gotten upset with someone or angry at a spouse or something like that because they didn't do something, yet we never said it was something we wanted them to do in the first place. We just assumed they should know what's in our head and have done it for us anyways. This is important to provide these clear expectations, because this is informing that person that I expect you to be on time in the barn every morning. Don't show up 2 hours late where I've already done half the work. I need you to be on time. When you're here, I need you not to be on this. I need you to be engaged in the operation of what we're looking to do. So having these clear expectations, consider job descriptions. There's hundreds of examples online of job descriptions. Your extension office or others can help you look at job descriptions. Give the person a clear set of objectives and things that you want them to do. A lot of farms we work with more than one child that wants to come back on the farm, they'll look at it on the enterprise basis. So one may be in charge of crops and planting, one may be in charge of herd health, one may be in charge of manure management. You're giving them those clear job descriptions and hopefully finding the ones that they have some kind of desire to do, or at least have some interest in. You're setting this out for them, because then at the end of the day, when you go to evaluate them, you have something to evaluate them against. You can't just evaluate them on the things you thought they should have done. That's unfair. Know your role and the role of others. That kind of goes to what we've been saying here all along. Where do we stand financially? So now we finally get into the numbers aspect of this. Is the business profitable? Are we making money? And not, making money profitable. The gentleman before talked about the Schedule F. Most farmers try to find a competent accountant. That competent accountant is the person that can get your income as close to zero as possible for tax purposes, right? But there's still a profitability on the farm. Are we making money on the farm? Are we able to cover living expenses? Are we able to cover the needs of the farm? Are we able to grow the farm? Are we solvent? So, in other words, do we have the available capital or equity to make the changes that we're looking to make, right? If the transition's happening and that transition maybe is changing the type of operation, or it's going to require an expansion, and the farm is leveraged up to the nth degree, you're not solvent. You're not going to be able to make those changes you want to make in the transition, and you're going to have to deal with those things before you really can start dealing with some of the transition aspects. Are we liquid? So do we have ready and available cash? And liquidity, a lot of times, the one gentleman in the previous session was talking about selling at a farm market. If that opportunity opens up, or let's say you go to the market and all of a sudden you develop 100 new customers, you have no liquidity in your business. Your ability to ramp up production, your ability to make those changes can't happen fast enough, and I guarantee you that there will be someone else there that will pick those customers up in the meantime. And are you efficient? So, one of the things we look at is efficiency. Farming is very good, I think, sometimes with benchmarking. We have the Chicago Board of Trade for crops. We have National Ag Statistics Services. We know from extension agents, how well other farms are doing in their community. So look for similar types of farms and benchmark against them. How are they doing things? How are they efficient? Like the dairy industry looks at income over feed cost, right? So how are we converting that feed into income on the dairy farm? That's an efficiency type equation for farming operation. Because if you're not efficient, then maybe you need to look at some of those things. Are there things that we're doing that are not as profitable. Like, let's say our wholesale market is different than our direct farm sales. And one of them is doing very well, the other one is doing very poorly. At the end of the day, we're still making money. But when you look at these as individual profit centers, then you can say where are those deficiencies, and maybe we should put more effort into one or the other, or we need to change things that we're doing in the one that isn't profitable to bring that more up to speed. So, this was touched on with the business plan. We need to develop these sort of basic financials. I was talking to the gentleman after the presentation was over. I know that all of you got into farming in order to be HR managers and chief financial officers. Exactly. So one of the things is there a family member who really likes this kind of stuff? Can we identify the person and make that their job? I was just at an Ag Choice Farm Credit event. They have Ag Biz Masters, which is a program that teaches a lot of budgeting and financial management on farms. And the one person was there that he actually went out and did a degree in computer sciences, decided he wanted to come back to the farm and knew that he didn't know the farming operation that well. He knew numbers, was very good at numbers. So when he integrated back onto the farm, he became their office manager. He became their financial person, and started tracking a gazillion different aspects of this farming operation and helping them with their efficiency and their profitability. That's the role that he found on the farm. If that person doesn't exist in your farming operation, then this is where you may want to look at what is the value to my farm to understanding all of this stuff, and do I look at going to Farm Bureau or some other entity that maybe can provide financial services and hiring someone to do this. You don't, if you hate doing this, you're not going to get it done. It's not going to be done well. You're going to need to find somebody that can help you. Any questions so far? I know I've been kind of going through this. Yes.
You work for the business that you work with that.
Yes.
So how position in West Virginia?
I actually spent some time this morning looking on the West Virginia Department of Agriculture website, Farm Bureau website. There's mention, but I don't know that there is an exact match to what we do in our department.
What kinds of costs are associated with type of service?
My cost is zero because as a state employee and taxpayer, you pay my salary. At least those that live in Pennsylvania do. So there's no cost for what we do. A lot of times, though, as a state employee, I walk a very fine line between providing you technical assistance and consulting. Once I walk across that line and I start doing things for you, I'm in a very gray area as to my ability to do that. So a lot of times what we will do is, as the farm transitioning, there actually is, it's called the International Farm Transition Network. They have a certification process that we go through. You have to take a test, you have to do group studies, you have to actually go out on the farm and show that you're doing these types of things. We'll sit down and help you think through all these things, but then there's going to be points which are launching points to an attorney, which are launching points to an accountant, and other professionals that you're going to be hiring to go through this. What we hope to do on our end is to get you far enough down the line through the thought process that you're not paying an attorney $200 an hour or $150 an hour to think through this for you. You're going to go in and say, this is what we want to do. We want all of our children to receive equal shares of the farm, or we want the business to transfer through shares into S corporation to this child or whatever. And then the attorney can sit down and make that legal for you, but you're not sitting there expecting them to come out to the farm 4 or 5 times to get it. So that's why we're providing that technical
So
assistance.
is it in West Virginia, what would be West Virginia's first contact organization?
I would think one of your contacts would be your West Virginia Extension office. Yeah, I mean, I looked in there, they did have economic development folks that do some business planning. Most states have what's called SCORE chapters. That's a national organization. SCORE is basically retired professionals that will spend time with you to go through business planning and corporate planning. And I don't know, I did not look this up unfortunately, I don't know whether you have small business development centers, but you very well may we're on to step 7 of our 12-step process. Do we have what we need? This kind of goes back a little bit to looking at the profitability, solvency, liquidity, efficiency of the operation. One of the things that I try to help people work through on a farm succession or transition, tell me where all the tools are. Tell me the equipment maintenance. Tell me, is there still a warranty on this? Where does that information exist? That if for some reason you become incapacitated or you pass away, I'm not trying to put all these pieces of the puzzle back together. So you want to understand, you know, having these conversations, having this, even if you're keeping a journal, a business journal, or something like that, you know, if you've been looking at expanding and mom and dad have maybe been having conversations with the neighbor who may be looking to sell and they're a little bit further down the line with that, if there's nowhere that that information exists, that conversation can oftentimes die right there because you don't have these sorts of things put down somewhere. And if we have enough time, we start talking a little bit more about estate planning. A lot of times when you're starting to deal with some of the documents that are estate planning, it's a very emotional and a very difficult time period when you're looking for those documents. Not knowing the combination of the safe, where those documents are held, adds to that stress. So having sort of just a key piece of information, how to get to this stuff, what's there, understanding what the resources are on the farm, and if there's underused resources. Is there a section of the property that you have really not been doing anything wrong? Why haven't you been doing anything wrong? Is it in a floodplain? Is it incorrect? Is it, you know, is that something we can look at pulling out and then turning into another pasture or doing something with? So getting these lists of resources, getting down to just where some of the small tools are, will very much help in the succession planning process and understanding what we have. It will also help you to identify back here, maybe we haven't done it, but it'll help to identify some of these gaps. Are there enough resources to achieve the same goal? So if we don't know what resources we have, how do we know that we have enough resources? Steps 8 through 9, analysis and evaluation. This is the most fun part of farm transition planning. This is what everybody likes to do. How many people have heard of or done a SWOT analysis? One person. So you can run this portion up, right? Okay. SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We will go through this a lot of times when we're sitting down with the family. You literally take a big piece of paper, you make 4 quadrants, just like that gentleman did with his blue sheet of paper. Top left, strengths, top right, weaknesses, bottom left, opportunities, and bottom right, threats. Internal to the operations are strengths and weaknesses. The reason that this is a good exercise when you have the whole family together is that you're going to learn some things very quickly. What you, as the older generation, may think of as a strength, the younger generation may see as a weakness, right? Because as a strength, you know, we see as a strength is our dairy operation as a strength. We're very good at dairying. Well, if the next generation doesn't want to dairy, guess what? That's a weakness. I don't want to do that. So what are these internal strengths or weaknesses? If little Johnny, who's 20-some years old, coming back into the operation, isn't pulling his weight, he may think he's a strength because he's the greatest thing in his own mind, but the rest of the family may see him as a weakness because he's not pulling. So, and sometimes these can become very frank and what I like to call ground truthing the information. We're not gonna assume anymore. We're gonna start laying some of these things out in thoughts. The other side of this coin is that not that it's confrontational, but sometimes when you start listening to these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you start to realize how much you really are on the same page. And a lot of these fears that we talked about earlier start to dissipate. And I would say, for the most part, I have been on some farms where I've broken up fist fights between family members. I've had babies handed to me while mom and dad go out to have it out. But that's very rare. For the most part, these transitions happen in a very orderly and not simple, but at least they happen in a manner where everybody is sort of on the same page. We hear the horror stories, and I think sometimes it's that fear of those horror stories that keep us from wanting to go through the process ourselves. But I think sometimes what amazes me on family farms is how much the family truly is together in the decision-making process. Mom and dad may be afraid of having a discussion because they think the person that's not going to be sitting on the farm is going to feel slighted. When you finally have the conversation, the person said, look, I understand this isn't something I have a desire or passion to be in, and strengths and weaknesses. What are we good at? What are we bad at? What do we do well? What do we need to improve on? External opportunities and threats. This is where you're talking about maybe one of the children decides that they want to be the front person for the farm. They want to do this one-on-one marketing at farm level. So they see as an opportunity the ability to go out and market directly to the consumer or market to the farm market. That's when you see that opportunity pop up or someone brings that up. Now we're going to look at the threats, and these are all external threats. So the threat may be there's two other folks selling meat, beef, goat, whatever, at the farm market. What are we going to do to be better than them to get customers? So opportunities may be a piece of property nearby that's going to be coming up for sale, right? How do we do that? Or threats may be, like the gentleman in the previous session said, the really big landowner is putting a lot of pressure to purchase the land. Or in Pennsylvania, and I'm sure it's true down in West Virginia, anywhere close to the Baltimore, D.C. metropolitan area, there's a big threat in the Baltimore, D.C. metropolitan area to farming. What's that? Development, right? So if you are landlocked and you've got development all around you, that's an external threat. If you've got neighbors that don't like the fact that it stinks every once in a while, that's an external threat, something you need to deal with. Opportunities are those things that maybe lead to an expansion or ways you can do things better with the farm. Financial feasibility. This is the one thing. My predecessor said this, so I don't want to steal without giving some credit. The way to find out if your farm planner or your accountant knows anything about farming is ask them what an enterprise budget is. And if they come back and say the thing that Captain Kirk rode around in, they do not understand agriculture, right? In agriculture, we understand enterprise budgets. We understand that the different aspects of the farm are broken down into different enterprises. And a lot of times we're looking at those things differently. Going back to the previous conversation, you need to look at these separate enterprises because you need to look at where your profit centers are. What are you doing that's making money? What are you doing that's bleeding? You need to understand. Maybe everything's making money. Scenario-based budgets. If we did not change anything, what would our budget look like? If we expanded the herd by 100 head, what would that budget look like? What would we need to get our feed costs down to in order to, or what would we need to sell the beef out or dairy, goats at for the ability to repay the loan for the expansion? These scenario-based budgets, and we all hear about stress testing of banks. We need to stress test our own operations. Right now, beef is very, very good price, right? What happens if that drops by $2, by $3? What happens if fuel oil starts to, crude oil goes back up to $100 a barrel, and now our fuel costs increase or our feed costs increase? Because guaranteed prices go back up a lot faster than they come the other way around. So these scenario-based budgets are going to start testing what these different scenarios are that you want to do, or these different options on your farm. And again, I talk about this because I enjoy planning and I enjoy doing these types of things. Maybe do one scenario. One of the things that we'll talk about here. My other job at the department is emergency management. We've listened to Exercise at State College. We've been cleaning up water breaks all over Pennsylvania, helping folks out with that. Something that we do in the emergency world is called ACE, plan, alternate plan, contingency plan, and emergency plan. The plan is your business plan. That's the thing that if everything stays the same, everything goes well, this is the plan, this is what we want to do. The alternate plan is that sort of stress test. What do we do if feed prices increase by this amount? What do we do if the cost of doing business goes up or down? The contingency plan is more things that sort of go critically, right? This is maybe where the contingency plan is making sure that we have some type of crop insurance or other insurances in place on the farm that are going to be able to kick in the case of a disaster. The emergency plan, typically in the emergency planning world, the emergency plan is the one where you duck your head and run really fast. Like, we put the base camp in the wrong place and now the fire's coming, we got to go. So in farming, the emergency plan may be if everything truly goes down the tubes, what is our exit strategy? How do we dispose of the land or other assets so that we can continue to be a family unit and live? This is the plan you never want to get to, but it's something that needs to be thought of, that if everything goes wrong, what is that emergency plan? What is our escape hatch? How do we get out of what we're doing and continue to function? you're doing the first 9 steps, you've been putting the business plan together. You've been developing the financials, you've been developing the mission statement, the vision statement, objectives and goals. This is going to look more into take all of that, start looking at the marketing strategy, start looking at your customer base. The plan should be easy to understand and communicate your business vision, goals, and objectives to other family members, financial planners, and lenders. So, in essence, what that means is if this is my plan, I should be able to hand this to just about anybody, have them be able to understand. Maybe not to the level of detail that I would, but they should be able to at least understand where I'm going, right? So, if you have this plan, you hand it to your financial planner, and your financial planner has no idea where you're going, how are they going to help you to develop some of those financial goals? It does not have to be, and the gentleman in the previous session said it does not have to be a 200-page PhD dissertation. It could be a couple pages, just enough of a plan. And the other thing is that the plan is not the be-all and all of the work. The plan is what you thought of given the information that you have, right? So if that information changes, what else changes? It's the plan. I don't have the quote up here, but I'll try to summarize it the best as possible. General Patton said, plan is not important. The planning process is what means it. The fact that you took the time to think through all of these things so that when the battlefield changes, if you've gone through the planning process, you can adapt to those changes because you understand what's going on. In your farming operation, if something goes wrong and you've gone through the planning process, you know what your resources are, you know what your liquidity is, you know all these types of things, or at least have a basic understanding of them, so you can adapt to that situation faster than if you hadn't done the planning at all. The plan itself, very often, is never something that happens and gets followed to the T. It's just something that you want to go through that process, and you want to continue to go through that process. This should not be the plan that goes on the shelf and begins to gather dust. How am I doing on time?
You got 15 minutes.
Good. Oh, good. We might not get through all the estate plannings. So estate planning and retirement planning, important for the retiring and entering generations. Need to understand your business structure, organization structure, some of the stuff we've been talking about prior. It affects your estate taxes, your income taxes, how you transition to farm. If you transition to while you're still alive, that's going to have different tax implications than if it transfers after you're dead. How income is handled, how long-term capital gains is handled. This is typically when we do a presentation like this, the question that people want answered, how do I avoid taxes? You can avoid some taxes, you will never avoid all taxes. You pick the one you want to avoid. Uncle Sam and the state will find a way to get some portion of it somewhere along the line. I think it was actually 2012 when the transfer tax for the federal level went completely away, kept going up to like $1 million, $2 million, whatever. So when we did presentations that year, we said if you want to actually plan, you just need to die just before December 31st, and then the transfer without any tax. But I don't think many people could predict that. Your estate is everything that you own. Everything from personal assets, business assets, your investments, stocks and bonds. I throw this on your online accounts. This is sort of the thing that we're seeing a need to deal with, and the next generation will definitely need to deal with. How do I access the bank account? It's now online. How do I access, and I'll say this, Facebook accounts, other things that people have nowadays. This is a very big struggle on how family members can get access to these things after someone passes away. We either shut them down or keep things from happening to them and deal with them. So this is something that probably is maybe another 5 or 10 years. It's a emerging issue that we're seeing that needs to be developed. Especially as more and more interactions with other businesses is happening 90% of the time online, you need to be able to understand how to get into those accounts. That goes back to that maybe list of like the safety deposit box number, the online passwords. What is estate planning? Anticipating and arranging for the distribution and disposal of your assets. This is primarily what 95% of people will think of when they think of estate planning. This is your will, right? How do we do that? The transfer of the business. This is another aspect. We talked about this. This is kind of going back to what we talked about earlier. We're going to get into a little more detail now. I know Pennsylvania a lot better than other states. I did look it up for West Virginia, so I'll at least tell you that it's similar but not exactly the same. If in Pennsylvania you die without a will or some other document that says this is how I want things to transfer, you are considered to have died intestate. It's just basically a fancy word for saying an attorney will not figure out what to do, or a judge in this case. Pennsylvania has intestate laws, which basically go over the succession process, and in general, your estate will transfer to your spouse and surviving family members in an order of succession. So in Pennsylvania, the spouse will get the first $30,000 plus half of the estate, and then the remainder of equal shares go to these folks if they are living and exist. So the rest would go to children. If there are no spouse and no children, the estate would go to the parents of the person that is deceased. If there are no parents still living, then to brothers and sisters and their progeny. And each time we get out through this process, if we stop at one of these and those people exist, they're going to get to the estate. Then to grandparents, uncles, aunts, and their children. And in Pennsylvania, if none of those folks are living, and you're the last one to die, you just gave the Commonwealth the value of your estate. You have no claim. So even if your will just simply says, you know what, my kids are a bunch of little jerks, I'm going to leave it all to the church, put that in the will. Otherwise, how Pennsylvania in this case will get it, and I think it's similar to West Virginia. It basically goes down through this order of succession. So what are the essentials of an estate plan? These are the different things. Advanced health care directive. How many people know what an advanced health care directive is? Power of attorney for asset management. Most folks know power of attorneys. Does everybody have a power of attorney? Yes, no, you don't have to. If you're not comfortable answering, that's fine. HIPAA release form. HIPAA is the federal law that deals with our medical records. And let me tell you that in cases where, as a family member, you need to be making medical decisions for your loved one, HIPAA regulations can sometimes make it very difficult for a doctor to share with you what is actually going on medically with that person. What do these all have in common? They empower those that you trust to make essential decisions based on your wants, needs, beliefs, upon your death, or incapacitation. When I was going through the International Foreign Transition Over training, one gentleman from Nebraska made a comment that has stuck with me. When you think about giving these types of authorities to other folks, or even when you're looking at the succession planning process, who may have some more roles or duties in that, think about all of your children and a Snickers bar. Which one of them would you give the Snickers bar to tell to separate it and give equal shares to all of their other siblings? In some cases, that may be none of them. One of them may be the one that undoes the wrapper, shoves it all in their mouth, and runs away laughing. And there may be one that is going to take that and separate that into equal shares and give that out. You need to be thinking through this process. These are folks you're going to be empowering to make decisions on your behalf, with your assets, with your financials. So look for the Advanced Healthcare Directive. List your healthcare preferences when you cannot communicate your wishes. So if you become incapacitated and you do not want to have extraordinary measures done, resuscitation, CPR, different things, dialysis, it will put the hospital and those that are treating you on notice. Now the thing is, if the hospital does not have this on record, and you can't, and this is why I go back to knowing where this is in the safe, if the hospital doesn't have this on record and you don't have a way of getting it to them, they're going to take the necessary measures to sustain your life. That is their oath as the healthcare provider. So if you want these things to be in place, you need to have people that are going to be taking care of you, know how to get it. One of the things that sometimes we'll tell people is even to keep a copy of this in the glove box of your paper, so that it's at least somewhere where you know where it is and you can get access to it. And list those that are empowered to make healthcare decisions on your behalf should you not be able to express your desires. When you go through this, you definitely, and I'll say this at the end again, these are the documents that you need to have internally. These are the things that you want to have someone that knows what they're doing putting them together. There are online folks that can do this. It's available. I caution you, so you need to have this because I'll give you my own family's example. We found my grandmother unconscious. She went to the hospital. Her healthcare directive basically said no extraordinary measures. Blanket statement, no extraordinary measures, right? Basically, she had gone into renal failure. She needed kidney dialysis. We knew this was coming. She power of attorney appoints those that you trust to handle your financial affairs, lists those areas and situations in which you allow individuals to assist you, and should be explicit as to when someone can act on your behalf. So in my father's case, he had a blanket power of attorney. Power of attorney can be limited to just financial decisions. The ability to spend money. So if you become incapacitated, does that mean that the tax bill won't come at the end of the year? Does that mean that the water bill won't come at the end of the month, right? So this power of attorney could allow someone to at least pay your bills if you're not able to do so because of some medical emergency. And you can limit it to just that, just the ability to pay bills. You can have it that they can transfer money. This can be very specific. Again, the disclaimer is these are the documents you really need an attorney. HIPAA release form. This is, you can find, actually this one that you can find online. These forms are, they'll have example forms of this for most states or in most situations. It basically just empowers the medical care provider to share your medical information with the person that you designate to receive that. Yes. Oh, thank you. So provides direction for access to healthcare information. If you're going to be helping make those decisions, you need to know this one. And then the biggie, the one that we all think about, the will, how we're going to transfer it, what is going to get transferred. And wills can get very detailed. It doesn't have to just be transferring of assets to my children or transferring assets to the spouse. I mean, my wife and I are still relatively young. We don't have a whole lot of assets. But in our decision-making process, our children will simply just receive our money. The money will go into a trust for them. They will receive a portion of it at 18. They will receive a portion of it at 24. And they will receive the remaining of it, I think, at 30 is what we have. So it's spread out because to have an 18-year-old receive this lump sum cash, where they have the decision-making process to handle that amount of money coming into their pockets when they are at the age of consent to have the money come to them. If we are passing away before they become the age of 18, then we have godparents and other folks that are identified to provide for their care, and the money goes into proper places for that care to be administered. So you can get very specific on how you want those assets distributed. You can get to the point that, if somebody has their eye on the specific China hutch, or if somebody has an eye on some other things in there, you can designate who those items go to, or you can designate that those items be sold at auction and the proceeds of that auction be distributed. So these are the types of things you can deal with and again, not a one-time exercise. I guarantee you probably every 5 to 10 years, again, I like planning, every 5 to 10 years we pull the will off the shelf, we look at it. In our case, we have a 5-year-old son or a 5-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. We can't let that will stay the same when we had our first child because now there's a second child. That will now needs to be changed to reflect the second child. The will may need to be changed to reflect grandchildren, other folks that you have that you want to receive funds. Maybe you become very involved in an organization in your later life and you want some of that proceeds to go to them. This is something you want to be updating as your needs change. Other options, things that can be done that do not involve a will, can be trusts, and I'm sure folks have talked about living trusts, revocable trusts, irrevocable trusts. Each of them has their place in the world. It can do a lot of good things, and we do talk about irrevocable trusts. I know one of the catch-ups a lot of people are worried about is if you go into some kind of long-term care facility, there are some laws and regulations when you look at that. How many people that 5-year look back period everybody talks about with your assets if you're going into long-term care? One of these we've run into with the revocable trusts are that depending on how those revocable trusts are written, if I have the ability to revoke that trust and pull that money back, all of those assets, even though they're in a trust, can still be considered part of my estate for the 5-year look back. Irrevocable trust is typically saying, I have now put this money out, these assets out, and no longer control what happens to them. That person can slip the candy bar up to look over these assets, and that gives you a little bit more of that firewall protection between those things and that 5-year look back. Deeds, you can actually put directives in deeds. I mean, we have farmland preservation, that's a deed restriction on the farm. You can use deeds to let your directions be known. one more time, I wanna make sure that gets in the recording. These are types of things you wanna talk to an attorney about. The other thing, making sure those that you give responsibility know and are willing to accept it. Don't assume that the child that you're giving this responsibility to wants it, right? Have the conversation and make sure that they understand what they're getting into. If you have godparents, folks that are designated to take your children, you know, if they're not the age of consent yet, you want to make sure that they understand what that means, what they're getting themselves into. So you want to put the plan into action. You've taken all this time to put it together. Don't let it sit on the shelf. Start putting it into action. Transitions will happen one way or the other. And I add step 13 to it. We just had Friday the 13th, so we add step 13 to this. Make sure you're going back and looking through it. I've said this a bunch of times. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please let me know.
How can they get a copy of that 12 step or 13 step process you have there?
I can either send it to the folks that are managing the event, or it is available online.
So I guess if you wanted that, it's all there, you could email him.
Yeah, if you email me, I'll send it to you. Absolutely.
Write down his email address, do that. Great. Any more questions, Mr. Grissinger? Very valuable information. I wish the room was full, but we appreciate you, Jerry.